And I want to talk to you a little bit about the concept of equivalent fractions. Now, notice I use equivalent because really when we talk about equivalent, it's a little bit different than being equal. They have the same numerical value, which we'll get to. So I've drawn this little picture here, and as you can see, we've got one strip of, let's say it's cake. And our cake in this picture is divided into thirds, just like we did today with our paper, into sixths and into ninths. But as you look here, you can see that the same amount is colored in as green. Okay, and if you look at these fractions, 1/3 is the same as 2/6 and the same as 3/9. Okay, so that is how you get equivalent fractions. You're just dividing into smaller and smaller bits. So we're going to talk about how you work with equivalent fractions today. So as I mentioned, they have the same numerical value. Now, how do you make an equivalent fraction? All you do is you multiply or divide by the same number on the top and the bottom. So for example here, we've got 1/2. I've multiplied both the numerator, which is the top number, and the denominator, which is the bottom number, by 3. So we get 3/6. Same equivalent fraction. Okay, and in this instance, 5/25, I've divided both the top number, the numerator, and the bottom number by 5, which makes it 1/5. And I want to talk a little bit about this dividing here because that is sometimes called simplifying a fraction. And I want to show you how you do that because it will be super handy when we go to working with operations with fractions. So I need to digress for a moment and talk to you about the idea of the highest common factor. I'll start with factors. Factors are just numbers that are multiplied. Factors of a number, so if you say factors of 26, you're looking at all the numbers that could be used if they were multiplied together to make that number. So let's do a couple of examples. With 12, well, there's 1 is always a factor. There's 12, obviously, so you always can say 1 and the number itself. In this instance, we know that we can do 2 and 6. 2 times 6 is 12, and we can also do 3 and 4. So see, 12 has got quite a few factors. Those are the factors of 12. Okay, let's look at a prime number, 7. Now 7 doesn't really have any other factors, just 1 and itself. That's what makes it a prime number. So in this instance, we're looking at not much in common in terms of factors. We'll come to what a highest common factor is. It's just like it sounds, highest as in largest, common as in things they have in common, and factor. So the highest common factor, you see it all the time, is HCF. It's the largest factor that two numbers have in common. So in this instance with 12, we already know that 12's factors are 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, and 12. But what about our friend 16 here? 16, we already know 1, 2, 4, 8, and 12 are all, 16 are all factors of 16. Okay, so when we're looking for the highest common factors, what's the biggest number that these two numbers have in common? And you can see here that it's 4. So the highest common factor between 12 and 16 is 4, which means that if you had a fraction, you could divide both the top and the bottom number by 4 and reduce your fraction, which is what I'm going to show you next. Okay, key idea, really important, simplifying a fraction. To simplify a fraction, you divide the numerator, which is the top number, and the denominator, which is the bottom number, by the HCF, the highest factor that they have in common. Okay, so let's do a couple of examples here. 8/24. We know that the factors of 8 are 1, 2, 4, and 8. What about 24? Let's say we've got 1, 2, 4, 6. Oh, I missed 3 in there, sorry. 3, 4, 8, and 24. And there's 12 in there as well. Okay, so if we're looking here, what's our highest common factor? It's 8. So if we divide 8/24 by 8, You know, 8 divided by 8 is 1. 24 divided by 8 is 3. So we've got 1/3. We have simplified this fraction by dividing them both by the same number, which happens to be the highest common factor. Now look, if you weren't sure which was the highest common factor, you could take 8/24 and you see that they're both even, so they can both be divided by 2. You could reduce it like this. You could say, well, that's 4/12. And then you'd be like, wait a minute. I reckon I could reduce that again. And you could reduce it again by 2. You'd get 2/6, and it becomes a little bit easier there. It's really easy to see that that's 1/3. It's okay if you have a couple of tries until you get it as simple as possible. That's fine. So let's look at this. We already know with 7 that the only factors of 7 are 7 and 1. And what about 21? We've got 1, 3, 7, and 21. So our highest common factor is 7. Divide them both by 7 and we get 1/3 again. Okay? That is how you simplify fractions. It's that easy. It's not, I know a lot of people get really hung up on the simplifying. It's not that tricky. And as I said before, you can just keep having goes at it until you're sure it's as simple as it can get. Obviously, if a prime number is in there, it's not going to get any simpler usually, particularly if there's a 1. Okay, this will be really useful to you when you get to operations with fractions. So it's worth getting some practice, getting confident in it, getting good at it, because when you get to some really big fat fractions that could easily be reduced, it's so much easier to add, subtract, multiply, and divide when you've got the fractions simplified first. Much easier. Okay, try some at home and good luck.